All right, sorry about the delay there, folks. Welcome back to another installment of Free Read Fridays. I'm your intrepid narrator, Fragath, and today we're going to read some selections from Interzone magazine, Volume 1, Number 3. Autumn of their first year. I want to say it was 1984? 82. 1982. So some short stories in here. In truth, I have not knowingly read the stories in here. I was going to do the Dissemblers and No Coward Soul. I'm going to pass over Overture for a Midsummer Night's Dream because my time is somewhat limited. Yeah. So, yeah. You'll notice, if you can see it at all, it's a smidgen blurry, specifically the letters. Punctuation is particularly hard to see. I don't know if there was some sort of AI upscaling or if it's just artifacting of the scanning and then copying and maneuvering around of the file. But I know for a fact that over here, I don't want this. There's definitely an ellipsis. You can't see that, can you? Oh no, there's my mouse. There's an ellipsis there. I can't see those dots. And it's much larger on my screen than it is for you, probably. And not compressed by YouTube's algorithm if you're watching this after the fact. So we're gonna. These aren't too long. They're a couple pages each. We'll see after we get done the second one where we are timing wise, and I'll figure something out from there if I have enough time for another one. Next week, probably more of the same. I was very much going to do Radicalized by Cory Doctorow, or at least the first story in Radicalized, which is called Unauthorized Bread. But I had casually forgotten that that story is on the order of like 120 pages long, 110 pages long. And that would mean I'd just be doing that basically 2 weeks in a row for just that one story. It's a good story, and I will get around to it on this stream, I promise, but it wasn't quite what I was expecting or up to doing today. My apologies. Alrighty, so we're going to start with The Dissemblers. I just love that digital font. By Garry Kilworth. Pretty sure that's Gary, not Jerry. Get another sip of water here. Man, I've been desiccated lately. It's not even been hot. I'm just dry. The Dissemblers by Garry Kilworth, sorry. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Christian teachings still run thickly in my blood. My new religion, a mere 2 years old to me, is like an adopted child, dear because it is mine by choice, not accident. But, yet, like an adopted child, it can never be truly part of me. It is a grafted branch, well taken, and, indeed, an extension of me, but not inherent. Thus those phrases from my childhood learnings spring to mind more readily in crises than do the new words, though I love the latter more. Those others were with me from birth, and now I am nearer to death than the beginnings of my life. I sometimes panic. Will I be ready? Will I be ready? Or will they scream "Dissembler" in my wake as I try to gain entrance into a world I barely believe in? You must be Orgelt. I'm Jana Reese. Jana Reese? Could go either way. Jana. It's a Swiss school. Jana. I looked up from my newspaper to observe a tall, elegant blonde woman in a safari outfit. The clothes were obviously Zandra Rhodes. The woman inside them finished by a Swiss school. It's rude to stare, Miss Orgett. Mr. Orgett. I'm sorry. Please sit down. I placed the 4-day-old paper on the table before me and nodded to her companion, a thick-set man with square, tan features. He was about 2/3 her height. You too, sir, whatever your name is. His name is Chota. He's a deaf mute, she replied for me, taking one of the rattan chairs. Chota followed her example. Around us, coffee was being served in glasses the size of egg cups. I signaled the Arab waiter. He saw my 3 fingers and gave the slightest of nods, not even turning his head. Through the glassless window behind my guests, I could see the mountains of the Hadramaut, Hadramaut rippling in the heat waves. Before them, the dust-rock desert, furrowed unevenly by deep wadis. Brown kite-hawks created invisible whirlpools in the air above. I turned my attention back to my visitors. I expected you yesterday, I said, and him not at all. She stiffened, 2 red spots appearing on her high cheekbones. Chota is here for a reason. It's nothing to do with protecting me, Mr. Orgett. Unless that's an L? I'm going to go with Orgett. Or J, maybe. Ray. Though he's quite capable of doing so. He's from Papua, a forest Indian. Well, you look as though you usually know what you're doing. Did you fly up from Aden in the DC-3? She nodded. The one wallpapered inside with a rose pattern design. It was a serious remark. There is only one. Bit of a hairy ride, isn't it? I suspect the wallpaper is to hide the cracks in the fuselage. It gets a bit bumpy over the Red Fawn Hills. The thermals. Tends to shake up the superstructure. I could see my frivolity was having very little effect, and immediately abandoned it. Let's talk about why you're here, I said. The coffee had arrived accompanied by 3 glasses of water. The waiter placed them on the table. I paid him immediately, the coins clattering on the small brass tray. Oh, unless it's Jane Reese? Because that's looking like an E. That's the problem with these, is the E's and A's sometimes get conflated. And it's hard to tell. I think it might be Jane Reese, not Yana. I liked Yana. I'm not going to skip ahead to find out. Yana Reese was staring at the thick black sludge in her coffee glass. I don't want this. Then don't drink it. But we are in a coffee shop. It's paid for. Now, I understand you want me to find your husband for you. That's what the letter said. Her blue eyes observed me coolly. I could see a strength in her face I was not used to in one of her class. Then, mentally, I reprimanded myself for my prejudice. I haven't heard of anyone called Reese in the Hadramaut. Whoops. I haven't heard of anyone called Reese in the Hadramaut, I continued, and I would have done so if he were here. There's not that many whites in the area. His name is John Freeman. I didn't take his name when we married, and he didn't ask me to. I held up my hand as her mouth began tightening. Please, you needn't go into details. John Freeman I have heard of. He was at the consulate at Sana'a, wasn't he? Then he came down to the Hadramaut last cool season. I understand he discharged himself from the diplomatic service. The Papuan Indian momentarily distracted me by dipping his finger into his coffee. After licking it gingerly, he took another dip and grinned at me with small, blunt teeth. I smiled back. Friendly guy. Is he a tracker? You'd have been better with a Yemeni or an Adam. I, d- I can't read that. There aren't many jungles in South Arabia. I don't need your sarcasm, Orget. Just your knowledge of the local geography. Choate has a special job to do, and what it is my business, not yours. You won't trick me into revealing what he's here for. You'll know when I'm ready to tell you. A hot breeze came in through the window and lifted a few wispy strands of her hair. She was wearing it tied up with a yellow bandana, and I was about to say something banal like, "You look beautiful when you're calm," and then remembered in time that macho males had been out of fashion since Hemingway's heroes fell from grace, and in any case I was too old and tired. Well, perhaps not too tired, but it was a good excuse for not attempting something at which I was bound to fail. It is Jane. Fair enough, Jane Reese, I added. We'll try and find your husband for you. In my engineering days, I drilled half the local desert looking for oil. I never found. Looking for oil I never found. A man should be easy. At least he won't be hiding underneath the sand. Do you prefer horses or camels? Horses. And 1,000, wasn't it? Rials, that is? It was 700 to look and 3 when we find him. If we find him. I didn't come all this way just to go home with my tail between my legs. We'll find him, one way or another. And when you do, what then? That's where Chota comes in. And for the first time, she smiled. I think it's an A, not an E. I don't think it's Chota, I think it's Chota. Jane, not Yana, and Chota, not Chote. Okay. Because I have this up on the screen, you can at least hopefully see my dilemma here. And sometimes they look like one in one sentence and then something very different the next. So please be patient with me. I am doing this by the skin of my teeth. Spur of the moment. Skin of my teeth. That is the wrong idiom. My apologies. We met the next day and arranged enough provisions at the village to last us several weeks. I explained to Jane Reese that I knew the general whereabouts of her husband and that his location would at least be confined to one of 50 places. He's got to live near a well, I said. What about food? She asked. If he's got money, that'll be no problem. Other well users sell him food as they pass through. And anyway, there's gazelle and small game. I began to check our own provisions. Sugar, tea, raisins, flour. We were going into the empty quarter from Shimab, where I would have to rely on reports from strangers. Hopefully Freeman would not take too long to track down. Then I could get back to my wife in Shimab. I had not told Jane Reese about my wife because, to use Jane Reese's own words, it was none of her damn business. We were ready to set off just before noon. The horses stood waiting nearby. I unrolled my mat, took out my beads, and knelt in the direction of Mecca. "What are you doing?" asked Jane Reese, in a voice that suggested I was about to take part in some revolting perversion. "I'm about to say my prayers. I'm a Moslem." "Oh." "You don't have any objections to Islam, do you?" "Plenty," she replied, "but I won't let them interfere with the expedition." "The women?" I said. "The women," she confirmed, "and the disgusting barbaric practice of circumcision on small girls." "Islam is beautiful," I said. "It is people that are ugly." Then I ignored her, and all about me Then I ignored her and all about me to contemplate Allah, the one God, and the Prophet. Peace be upon him. The strange thing was, as a young man I had never been particularly religious. It was a woman who had been responsible for my conversion. They would never have allowed me to marry her unless I was a Moslem. Once the rituals obtained a hold on one's soul, however, they were difficult to shed. They were as addictive a drug as cut grass, which I had also taken to, since settling in the Hadramaut I knew that Jane Reese considered me one of those peculiar whites who have gone native, but I was not going to explain my complicated reasons to her. What her Papuan shadow thought, I had no idea. The whole alien scene must have been totally bizarre to him, yet his impassive face registered nothing. He was probably storing all these wonders of humankind to mime before a campfire in his native forests. And then this old whitey goes down on his knees and starts waving his arms at the sun, while the woman walks around him, slapping the sides of her boot with a short whip. The wind-blown dust and grit bit into our shins as we made our way among the foothills. Diurnal temperatures at sea level were around 150 Fahrenheit. Nocturnal Nocturnal, they were still over 100. Yet when we went up into the mountains, the water bottles froze solid. Jane Reese made no murmur of complaint since we had started out 3 days before. She had seen black scorpions, sand snakes, and camel spiders as big as soup plates, but she just clenched her teeth and swatted at them with her crop. The privation in the empty quarter is not a pleasant experience, and though she protected as much of her skin as she could, her milky complexion suffered under the harsh sun. I felt sorry for her, but she would have hated me for it, so I kept my pity to myself. On the fourth night out, at the well of Jebel Rachmel, we made a fire and cooked a lizard I had caught. She chose it as the moment to begin telling me about her husband and why she was searching for him. The story made me sick with apprehension. My father has been in the diplomatic service since he left university in 1922, and there was no reason why John should not take advantage of that. I persuaded him to take a post that Daddy found for him in Paris. John worked there quite happily until he was sent to Singapore to negotiate on behalf of a Briton there who had been convicted of smuggling narcotics. They still hang people for drug dealing in Singapore. John felt white. Red eyes glared from deep pits of pain. I shouted, knocking away the hand. "It's me, Freeman." The voice was so cracked and inarticulate I hardly understood the words. "It's me, Freeman." "Freeman!" I cried wildly. "What?" Then I remembered. The crippled figure crouched before me was fresh from the world of suffering and death. "Did you—" "Yes, yes, I saw." There was an inflection in the tone, a rising note implying excitement. "You must tell me your horse. You must sell me your horse. Only I have no money. Please, I'll send the money to you. Where do you live? No, I'll send it to Aden. You can collect it there. Please, the animal." "Take it," I said, "and water. You'll need water. Is she following?" "Not yet." He began removing the mare's hobble with inept, trembling fingers. I sprang up and helped him. Then I had to lift him into the saddle. "Where will you go?" "Anywhere," he replied. "I must get away. I must go." There was an urgency behind the words which disturbed me. I grasped his ankle. "Before you leave, what happened? What did you see?" I was eager to know what scenes his madness conjured for him under duress. "Death. I saw death." There was a thin line of saliva running from the corner of his mouth, and I wondered whether I had done the right thing in giving him the horse. In one night his hair had lost its color, and he had assumed the appearance of an old man, racked with arthritis. "What did it look like?" His eyes were damp. "Pain. I never felt such pain before. Not physical suffering, but an emotional, spiritual hurt. My very self was torn out of the flesh by which it was held so fast. I was forcefully wrenched away from life. A psychic experience which, dear God, I will have to go through at least once more, but next time I shall make it quick. A bullet in the brain, a fall from a high place.
He gripped my shoulder and pulled me closer to him. Imagine your veins being stripped from your body, or your skin peeled away from your face, eyes, limbs. It was like that, only not flesh from flesh, but spirit away from body. Then, after a long time, so very long, there came a single moment of peace, and I was looking into the dark kingdom of death. It was like staring into a deep black mirror, eternity dropping away before me. No, beautiful, but awesome. Not beautiful, but awesome, terrible in its promise of the everlasting. Then the soul reflected on the surface of death. Listen. He leaned down conspiratorially to whisper hoarsely in my ear. A man and a woman, when they love, when they live together, they begin to merge their personalities. You understand?
I.
Yes, their egos, their souls eventually mingle, become one, a single entity. I saw my soul, our soul, Jane's, mine, together, one, a single spirit. You see, she joined me. We did it together, but there was only one soul between us.
She joined you? I repeated, shocked. You mean that Indian, Chota, took you both near to death?
Yes, yes!
He jerked upright in the saddle, his long white hair flying wild in the dawn air.
She said I wanted it so badly, if I wanted it so badly, if I could not be deterred, then she was going to experience it with me. She has courage, you see, more than I have. Yet, oh God!
What? Is she dead? Did Chota go too far?
No, not that. The soul, the single spirit, it was all her. There was nothing left of me.
With that, he gave a sobbing sound and spurred the horse forward. I stood, watching him ride away into the hills, the dust rising around him like a morning mist. My body felt numb. This madman, this mad woman, they had entered my life and shattered my peace of mind. I was a Sunni Muslim, my life running according to his plan. Kismet. I followed and was led, and had no need to torture myself with right and wrong paths. I did what was expected of me, and my eventual reward would have been assured. I had even steered myself away from Shia Muslims and their fanatical, political approach to the faith, because I did not want my life to reflect the disturbances created by that sect. Now these dissemblers, these ugly pursuers of death in life had crumpled my calm, had destroyed my peace. One of them wore the mask of the curious, the inquisitive, yet all he craved was to escape to another place and time, where he would be beyond reach. The other was clothed in good intentions, yet underneath was a naked lust for power, of one individual over another. Now I, too, was a hypocrite, merely wearing the cloak, the guise of a devout man, which I would gladly have discarded if, through the valley of the shadow, I will fear no evil. Of course, it is not evil I fear, but death itself. If my soul belonged to Jane Reese, were Jane Reese, completely, entirely, then I would have no fear for John Freeman. Death will now be oblivion, for he will not exist except as her, and she exists only as herself. He will die, and then nothing. No gentle love, no loathsome hate, no indescribable peace, but more important, no harrowing, ugly fears. Some time later she came riding into my camp. Her beauty was still evident, but it was warped by a new knowledge. She was not physically bent and twisted like Freeman, though there were unsightly scars on her wrists and throat. Her eyes were wide, and there was a triumphant ring to her voice. "He's been here. Did he take your horse?" "Yes.
What are you going to do now?
Follow him, of course.
I shook my head. I won't come with you. For God's sakes, leave the man alone. Why hound him? She gave me a puzzled frown, then a small, tight-lipped smile. I knew why, and the knowledge, evident on my face, in my gestures, left me vulnerable to her contempt. Then she was gone, following the tracks he had left. I watched her arrogant pose as she rode high in the saddle, galloping her mount down the dark gray valley. I was sure I felt only pity for her. For her, I was sure I felt only pity for her prey. Not envy. It had to be pity. And that was The Dissemblers by Garry Kilworth. Garry Kilworth was one of the winners of the Gollancz Sunday Times SF competition in 1974, since when his stories have appeared regularly in a wide variety of magazines. He has published 4 novels, the most recent being Gemini God. Well, that was an experience. Blind reading is fun. Blind reading with kind of blurry print is fun. Blind reading a story that's good but kind of creepy. Yeah, pretty cool. So that was what, one, two, three, four, five, six, 7 pages? 6-ish, 7 pages. Let me see how long the next one is, because my time is somewhat limited. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, same. Okay. I can do that. I can do that. So we'll see how this goes. Hopefully people dug that last one. The Dissemblers. All right. No coward soul. Josephine Saxton. I am standing in the center of a howling desert storm, metallic grains tearing as if to strip me to the bone. I can find little air to breathe, and that is full of poisonous gases. My lungs burn, my senses turn in on themselves like struck snakes, whipping back at me for subjecting them to such awful terrors. But I am on a quest, and shall persist in the face of everything. I am stronger than I have ever been. My powers of concentration and my determination will carry me through. I come here seeking powers that no human being has yet had, and I must not fail. Like a knight in ancient times, I must run the gauntlet. I must be fearless. If only my limbs would behave properly. They thrust themselves against my control, grotesquely, so that I laugh. It must be the atmosphere in this dreadful land, this frightful country on the deserted planet of Amygdalanea. Amygdalanea, cool. Everything here is designed to trap the traveler. I am deceived by strange visions, tortured by horrible thirst and hungers, by sexual desires which I feel will drive me insane, but which sweep away as suddenly as they took me, leaving me mercifully drained and as dry as an old dying woman. I go forward, dragging myself through the tempest, wary of the ground which has hidden quicksands, unseen steps, rocks which seem to move into my path as if with intent to trip me, hurt me. Everything here is hostile. Everything is against my plan. But I shall win. Nadine prepares everything very carefully as she has trained herself to do. The room is entirely sterile. In the corner is an ozone ionizer quietly aiding continual purification. This entire project is a work of art. The carefully planned automatic film cameras will record every stage, for she wishes to exhibit the process as well as the result. Emphasis on the right syllable. She has written notes of all her intentions. It is only a matter of checking and double-checking, taking everything a step at a time. She has taken the appropriate light hypnotic drugs. Her hair is very short and washed with alcohol. She has administered local anesthetic. The mirrors are all in place so that she can see exactly what she is doing. Magnifying glasses are to hand, and the carefully tailored arm rests are covered in sterilized cloths. She lowers herself into the specially constructed couch, placing her head on the molded pad. She is an expert with fiberglass and resin, and made the couch herself. All the instruments are sharp. The telephone is silenced. The door is locked. "So now, Nadine, you can begin," she says aloud. She takes a scalpel, and with great care makes an incision in the image in the mirror. It is the top of her own head. Yikes. When the flaps are laid back, all neatly clipped, and the area cleared of blood, she takes a tiny circular saw, adapted from a dentist's drill, and cuts a large area out of her skull, lifting the object, which resembles something found on a beach, and laying it in a steel dish. The look of it amuses her. The only discomfort so far was the noise of the saw, which she hates. The whining sets her teeth on edge, but that is over. As she takes the first fine probe from the stepped-down electrical rack, she has to calm herself. It is very exciting. This is the culmination of 3 years of secret work. Autosurgery is not unknown in the world of art, but this will be the most sophisticated project to date. She has spent a lot of time practicing and researching, picking up knowledge from medical friends, reading, and performing similar operations on dogs and cats. She knows the process by heart. There are important differences between animal brains and her own, but basically everything is the same, and she is perfectly familiar with human models. First of all, it is a matter of bypassing certain areas of this delightful gray matter to reach a deeply seated spot. Sorry about that. There were figures approaching. This was to be the first confrontation. "Say who you are!" a loud voice demanded. And my page didn't move over. That's cool. She prepared to present herself with dignity. A lot would depend on what she said and how she did it, but someone else spoke in different accents. "What the bloody hell are you doing here?" The voice was very cultured, very angry. And also someone else. "You stupid twat coming down here at night! You've bleeding well asked for it!" Somebody leapt at her and gave her a clout on the arm with something heavy, and she squealed, all dignity forgotten, anger surging in response. "I am Nadine Quilling, an artist, and I am here seeking peace." Her mouth filled with sand out of the gale. The attacker grabbed her clothing, and the pain in her arm was excruciating. "I'll bleeding well do for you. Got any cash?" "No, nothing." She was pushing backwards and fell over a sharp rock, managed to roll onto her hands and knees. Fear got her by the skin, hairs rising like pins. Was this how it should be? Where was the rational discussion? "Get to your feet, woman, immediately, and explain yourself." She did so, to face a man in tweeds, with a bristly mustache. He carried a shotgun. His face was scarlet with fury. The storm dropped somewhat, and she spat out sand. If you trespass on my land, you will be shot as like as not. I don't tolerate poachers. I don't call the police. I act. You'd best be off, or you might get a blast from behind. Blast up the behind. Sorry. What are you doing here?
I'm on a mission. I seek peace.
Bloody Conchi, I suppose. No patience with him.
The man did not seem to be aware of the others poaching on his land. The youth with the weapon was doing a kind of war dance, laughing to himself.
She seeks peace. Tee, she seeks peace.
She was painted in an extraordinary manner. He was painted in an extraordinary manner, his face a canvas, his skull almost shaved, and dyed with some lettering which she could not decipher. The third person was more menacing. He had an unhealthy, spotted complexion, and mean eyes like a furtive rat. His clothes were poor, everything greasy and worn. He looked cold and underfed.
No money. Them with no money pay somehow.
He moved his hand and brought to life a flick knife, which he gestured with in a sly, gentle manner. It made the blood run cold. The three were obviously not together, but they were all against her.
Somebody like you shouldn't be out here at night. It's dangerous for those that don't belong.
Suddenly the painted youth went for her, but she was faster than he was and grabbed the thing in his hand, a heavy Kosh. All peace missions forgotten, she swung at him at the same time as aiming a kick at the shotgun, which went off with a dreadful sound, mingling with the screams of the man with the knife who got the full blast. The youth went down with a grunt, and she turned to the tweedy squire, but he was running away. Things were not going at all well, but at least she was whole and safe. Notes on Autosurgery by Nadine Quilling. I have always had a violent nature, all my life. All my life I have been the victim of a terrible temper. I once almost killed my little sister. It was only the timely intervention of an adult which saved me from putting the kitchen meat knife, an instrument of surgical sharpness, through her throat because she had once more stolen my teddy bear. School was fraught with fights. Teenage saw me, an intelligent girl who could pass exams easily, wandering the streets of the city with a knife and a gang of acolytes, looking for trouble. I am told that when I was a baby I screamed almost all my waking hours, bit my mother's nipples, and then the teats off feeding bottles. I was always loved in spite of everything. I was a wanted child, and my violence was not bred in a soup of Freudian deprivation or parental error, and they had wanted a girl. I have always been abnormally strong, able to win fights with boys, and later able to beat any man at Indian wrestling. All I had to do to win was to unleash in myself my ungovernable rage, and direct it into my arm. The sheer fact of existence fills me with fury. It is as if I was born full of resentment and rage at being in this world. I should have been born somewhere else, more suited to my talents, which, in spite of the flowering of my intellectuality, resulting in being recognized as an unusually clever, resulting which, in spite of the flower of my intellectuality, resulting in being recognized as unusually clever, does not make me feel at home on earth. My destiny is not fulfilled. I have never felt that. So I am going to alter this state of affairs. Earth is where I am and will be, but I am fully tired of losing friends with my evil moods. Many things have already been tried, of course. I have been to psychiatrists and neurosurgeons ever since I was little. My parents refused to allow me to have brain surgery because they feared the crude methods might turn me into a vegetable. They were correct, but the answer still lies in brain surgery. That is why I have devoted recent years to learning everything necessary about manipulation of the human brain. I am an artist, as is well known, but painting ceased to give me satisfaction, as did fiberglass sculpture. I have worked in performance art, and this new project is very much a result of those years I spent doing quite extraordinary things in front of people in art galleries. Now I intend to solve the central problem of my own life. Rather than trust myself to a brain surgeon, I myself will effect the radical change in temperament needed to make my life peaceful, without altering in any way my intelligence, perception of the world, or motor functions. More than one piece of autosurgery has been successfully carried out, although some have unfortunately been obliged to call for medical help due to exhaustion. This operation will be painless, and I do not anticipate fatigue. There will be no problems with main arteries. Success will lie with skill and delicacy. Having located my own amygdala, which is the seat of the disturbance, I shall implant permanent pathways to that and to nearby areas so that I can self-administer appropriate chemicals to the exact brain area needed whenever I feel slightly irritated, which is often the prelude to a fit of rage. I shall never again be out of self-control. I hope that this process will become recognized as a valid tool to people similarly affected to violent souls of all kinds who wield terror over others. I'm realizing I have to go back like half a sentence every other sentence, and my apologies for that. I hope that this process will become recognized as a valid tool to people similarly affected, to violent souls of all kinds who wield terror over others. To anyone who destroys the peace of the world by unleashing the powers of darkness which reside deep within their natures, whether there by natural accident or unfortunate distortion. I intend to benefit people instead of being remembered as one who ruined her own and others' lives because she could not keep her temper. Everything is prepared. See notes on procedure. I have no fear. She had several chemicals prepared in readiness. No one substance was a panacea. It would require experience to know which to introduce at any one time, and there was the monthly cycle, occasional illness, and medicines to be taken into account. Deep in the hypothalamus, many chemicals have many effects. Any interference must be as precise as possible, unlike the offerings of the chemotherapists she had encountered over the years. She had steroids, hormones, cannabinol, cannabichrome, adenochrome, ergotamine, Delt 1 form tetrahydrocannabinol. Oh no! I know half of these, but I can't pronounce them because half of them are cut off. Oh my gosh! And the faint is the font is faint. Okay, let's take this from the top. She had steroids, check. Hormones, check. Cannabinol, check. Cannabichrome, check. Adenochrome, check. Ergotamine, check. Delt 1 form tetrahydrocannabinol, check. Suprareserpine, check. Norepinephrine, check. Psilocin, check. And her own invention, check. Her own serotonin invert. It had hitherto been thought that serotonin was not, after all, a useful psychotherapic tool. Psychotherapic? Emphasis on the right syllable. I'm not actually sure which syllable gets emphasis there. I've never seen psychotherapeutic pronounced. Heard psychotherapeutic pronounced. It had hitherto been thought that serotonin was not, after all, a useful psychotherapeutic tool, but she had not been convinced from her reading. She had extracted her own serotonin and distorted its indole structure to resemble that of lysergic acid derivatives. What could possibly go wrong? The scar on her belly showed where she had opened herself to take the necessary samples from the bowel lining, and with the help of a biochemist, a dear friend who had no idea what she was actually engaged in, he'd mimicked this precisely, and could produce it in the lab next door, which had once been a kitchen. The only advantage of possibly getting someone else to do what she required was that a qualified brain surgeon would not be as excited as she was during the actual operation. She could not be too tranquilized, Her advantage was that strength of character goes hand in hand, paradoxically, with a vile temper. Her rage could tear the world apart, and she was making it construct a new world. Everything would be okay, said an optimist deep within that part of her which she now probed with a fine, erect, sterile wire. Sorry about having the mouse up in the middle where it was all viewable. I've moved it down so it is less visible. It rained, and all the world was mud. The mud smelled of death and effluence, of petrol and shit and lead. She wore dark green Wellington boots and a southwester hat, and in between, nothing. What could logic do in such a world? You would get wet eventually anyway. What could logic do in such a world? You would get wet eventually anyway. Trudging after her mother in the snow, it had been like this, the boots sticking in the green slime and clay beneath the perfect whiteness. Not far to go now, lovely. Soon be at school. Put your feet where I put mine, or you may fall into a bog. This field is full of bogs under the snow. Out there, though, in the countryside, the snow was never blotched by specks of soot. Lifting high the infant legs, in the end, the warmth of the schoolhouse full of enemies, now to be faced, her mother gone to work, leaving her small and precious, intelligent, very bad-tempered girl in the hands of ignorant teachers, and children who would laugh at the fur-lined hood her mother had sewed, and call her Eskimo Nell. On now through the terrible humors of this planet, where the weather was never good, was always dull and wet and cold and wretched. Oh, to be in England! Now November's here. Everything looks like a sea of diarrhea. Even earthworms could not thrive in this cold stuff, and they will survive almost anything. Planting daffodils, she had often marveled at the lively worms turning in their graves, indignant at being disturbed to make way for a bulb, which would also survive the ghastly winter, and thrust forth beauty and laughter enough to delight a crowd of old Wordsworths, whose hearts would lift at the sight of those glorious sex organs. But now it was serious, and she was alone. No mother to guide and cheer, and it didn't look much like anything at all had been planted. But, as in fairy tales and horror stories, there was a light on the horizon. Was it a house, a palace, or a will-o'-the-wisp come to lure her to her death in the bubbling morass beneath the outer shell of the planet? There was only one way to find out. A wind whipped up full of gall and ire, blowing the rain of sulphur from far hills fit to rot a frozen mammoth. But this was important work. Her legs must carry her towards the lights. It seemed to take an age, the knees weakening, the fingers long since dropped off with cold for all she knew, and hunger and thirst driving her mad to the point where she thought perhaps like Scarlet she might go with the wind and eat the very earth. Rhett and Ashley were nowhere to be seen when real trouble was brewing. Her senses were not deprived. Therefore, she need not have been looking inward so much. Her senses were not deprived. Therefore, she need not have been looking inward so much, deep into the sea of associations, not always as free as some literary critics will have it. But the outer world was so bloody awful, there was nothing for it but to be inward as well as go on. What? Like Milligoon to Christmas backwards or the light, it would have been perfectly possible to forget what world she was out to change, so awful was the world she was in. But deep in her mind it was there, the ideal, the idea, the id, the drive onwards to the light and salvation. The light was in an office block in a car park with no cars, but the door opened as she approached. as she approached it, but the door opened as she approached it, much as doors in hillsides open to those in fairy tales, or those with heavy shopping bags in department stores. A secretary in a nylon coverall waited.
Do you have an appointment?
That phrase, how many desperate supplicants has it put off forever? How many at the end of their tethers have simply stepped backwards and knotted the tether into a noose for their own necks? Yes, she lied.
Well, if you will go into the waiting room, I'll ask the chief to see you a moment.
On the waiting room wall, the posters. A skull smoking a cigarette, a reminder to have her cervix checked, a warning about toxicaria. But who eats dog shit anyway? A holiday poster for spectacular trips across the great central commissure. Complete, with arranged simulated brain damage, so that presumably one would not be able to read any more boring posters. The magazines on the table: Country Life, Vogue, Punch, instruction on how to go walking in the country dressed in a side-slit scarlet dress, with high sequined shoes, feathers in the hair, and punch somebody, possibly an unsuspecting pig. I don't know what's going on with this story, and I'm so sorry. And then the cross, well, I mean, she's obviously doing brain surgery on herself, but like, okay. And then the cross of Jesus on a handout, advertising Western meditation, which would change the world person by person. Relaxation was the key to eliminating all warfare. Jesus, with his coterie of thugs around him, instructing them how to spread the message so that all future generations would be able to torture and maim and kill in his name. The only one among them with any wit or foresight, Judas. And his girlfriend Mary, of ill repute, turned from a healthy woman into a foot fetishist. If he comes again, it will be different. She herself would personally attend to him. She, Mary Amygdala, would personally duff him up for all the pain and trouble and misery.
The chief will see you now,
said the secretary, who had glided in on the thick pile carpet. With no word she followed, dripping evil-smelling mud, and then stood there in front of the vast and dignified desk, covered in the hide of an unfortunate animal. She faced a pair of gleaming spectacles, which did not quite hide perverted intelligence shooting forth like sunrays at her disreputable appearance.
Have a seat.
She resisted easily the temptation to pick up the seat and bash him with it, sat on it, squelching bare bum, and the interview began. She gathered together her confidence.
I understand that you are applying for a passport and a license for agriculture.
You understand correctly. There would be no point in revealing negative emotion. It would get her nowhere. But the sight of that face was making adrenaline build up from underneath, making a stagnant sewer in weak conduits. The fury of ages was in her, in front of her its cause, all in one package, a manifestation of what fucked up the world. A white, clean, bespectacled, masculine, self-assured, unscrupulous, self-controlled, reasonable, rational, patronizing, helpful, fatherly, brotherly, friendly, efficient, trained, qualified, educated, powerful, potent, virile, moneyed, God-fearing, authoritative, secure, polite, and democratic male. He must be democratic, or she would not be here at all.
Well, let's begin at the beginning,
he said, relaxing visibly, the bristles on his face taking a slightly downward curve. She looked with her telescopic and microscopic eyes and saw his pores open and exude micrograms of sweat containing bacteria ethers and esters from whiskey, urea, and aftershave.
No, that's too far back. Let's begin now.
The whiskers made an arc in space which would have delighted Einstein, but nothing else showed.
Well, put it to me then in more detail. What do you require of this office?
He was being patient. I wish to have free access to the hypothalamic and amygdalanian territories, and after soul improvement, grow new crops guaranteed disease-free.
You must be aware that it will cost you millions, and that there are strict laws governing what is grown here.
Yes, but I am prepared to pay a large price, and you would gain in other areas also.
Would we, though? Our ecology is already very carefully balanced.
I noticed that, outside, she said with sarcasm. And then he reddened slightly. And then, as he reddened slightly, she told him what she planned to grow. Hybrids of cannabis sativa, peyote, various medicinal plants, and also in underground caverns with sunray and infrared, anticipating his pointing out that weather here was too stormy for such for too was bleh. Anticipating his pointing out that the weather here was too stormy and cold for such crops.
I see.
With glasses like those he should have been able to see. He should have been able to see, but he clearly did not, quite.
And how soon would you wish to commence work?
It was funny how some things commenced and others began. I wished to commence immediately.
I see.
There was a nasty ashtray on the desk, carved by some sad hand driven to torture alabaster. She saw it slowly lift itself and slowly work its way through his cranium, shattering slow blood over the room, and this vision warmed her while she waited.
Well, if you will just return to the waiting room, I shall run a few things through the computer, and then we can discuss it further. We cannot promise anything.
Of course not, she said, knowing that it would always be true. Out in the waiting room, she deliberately chose another chair to mark with an arse print. That is definitely an A, not an E. Out in the waiting room, she deliberately chose another chair to mark with an arse print. There was a mirror. She got up and went to check her appearance. The top of her head was open, the scalp laid back like turf, clipped short and neat, ready to lay down on a prepared surface. There were wires sticking out of the gray brain, a smudge of blood on her forehead. No pockets, no handkerchief, so she wiped off the blood with spittle as best she could. She sat on yet another chair, but she was dried out now except for her own humors, damply steaming on even the grimmest day. She was summoned again.
Well, I've checked a few facts and figures, and there certainly seems no need to terminate the application at this point. I will go before the board next Thursday, and we will let you know of their decision by mail.
But that's no good. I need to know now. I've got everything ready. It is a matter of life and death.
My dear lady, it is not a matter of life and death. I'm afraid there is no other way. We have to be democratic about these things. We can't have just any old project going through without a vote, and we cannot rush these things.
She thought of attempting to bribe him with promised cash, but he had another idea.
Of course, if you would like to discuss it further here and now,
he said in a different tone of voice, looking at her breasts. He turned round to a drinks tray behind him. Then she picked up the alabaster monster and hit him with it hard. She stormed out past the open-mouthed secretary, determined to go ahead with the project anyway. So it was illegal. Anarchy was the reply. Outside it was still raining, and there were no other buildings. It is at such moments that anger changes into despair. There had been a lot of anger, so there was a lot of despair. Slumping along in her wellies, she cried bitter, desperate tears. When they got into the schoolyard at playtime, the other children ganged up on her, pulling her ringlets. Outnumbered, she ran to the lavs. It's not a Y. She ran to the lavs to hide, and found frightful things written behind the door. Outside in the yard, under the shelter, were cages of baby white mice. Everybody got to look at them, except her. She wished it would be tea time so that she could go home. Then the bell rang, and she opened her eyes, aware of her sterilized room, the alarm set to go off every 10 minutes, as an aid in case of unconsciousness. Not infallible, but it had worked now. It was wonderful the way nothing hurt at all. In a superstitious corner of her mind, she had not quite believed that brain tissue does not itself feel. She steadied herself and selected a cannula, very cannula, very g- and very a cannula, cannula. I really don't know. Very gently worked it down into the tissue until the point made contact where an electrode had been. The matter closed around it as if welcoming the foreign object. The cannula was obtained through a the cannula was obtained through a biologist, a size used for goats. She had told him that she was doing a life-size sculpture of a brain operation on a goat, a perfectly possible thing for her to be engaged in. The top was adjustable so that she could have it exactly right, hardly protruding through her skull when replaced. She had not known how thick it would be, but judged correctly that it had been quite thick from the number of knocks it had taken during fights without cracking. 2 more cannulae went in without trouble. It was now a matter of testing to see if they were correctly placed, although she already felt sure. But she did not want to be the victim of perpetual appetites, or to feel continually hot or cold, or have her judgment and senses distorted in any way. A few millimeters and she might not be able to read, or to smell certain things. But she reminded herself to concentrate now, and not digress upon morbid possibilities. A human brain is not like an animal brain precisely, and doubtless human brains were individuals also, just like faces and hands. She only knew this one, and it was the first meeting. Suddenly the weather cleared, and she was in a burning desert. A beach, not a desert. There were few people about at this time of day, but no mad dogs. A sailor with his trousers rolled up and his peaked hat awry. The Greeks were friendly and good-tempered, the men much too friendly, but pleasant. Near by, a tethered goat munched on kitchen scraps, its golden eyes blank with greed. The sailor came and sat down beside her, jogging her paintbrush, ruining the sketch she was making. "Hey, steady on! Look what you've done!" He looked, but obviously could not tell there was anything amiss. He put his arm around her in a strong grip, hurting her bare arm, and put his other hand on her breast, which was clad only in a tiny bikini top. This was so unexpected and unusual. All the Greeks she had met had spent a lot of time chatting and being charming. He tried to kiss her. "Get off, you bastard! What the hell do you think you're doing?" In any language, the message was plain, from both of them. He had no smile, no charm, not a typical Greek, but horribly handsome and knew it. She started to struggle, but he persisted, murmuring the one word, "Fuck." "Oh, sod off, you pig!" she said, and got her strength together, leave, leaving him, heaving him off. Yes, heaving him off, as she stood up so that he rolled in the sand. Perhaps he was drunk, again unusual for a Greek. He was on his feet again, and instantly at her, but she got her ankle behind his to bring him down. He was very strong, but now she was furious, and crashed her fist into his teeth, making him howl and bring his hands up. Her other fist went into his eye, and her knee into his balls, bending him double as she sprang back. She grabbed her sketching box and hit him on the back of the head with it, flinging tubes of paint everywhere. He fell, groaning, then silent. She spent a lot of time getting back the paints, except one which the goat had eaten, packed everything and watched the sailor getting to his feet. Packed everything and watched the sailor getting to his feet, bending over again to vomit. He gave her a venomous glare and shook his fist, but she shook hers with more determination. He staggered off, and she went in search of some lunch. Thank heavens she had her strength. The world was not always safe for women. She lay back, sweating profusely on the sterile sheet. The sun, the effort, the doubt. What would have happened if she had not been able to zap him? It was not possible to think about it. Saliva came into the mouth with revulsion. She remembered now she had given the ruined sketch to the goat. So, a little more work and the worst of this project would be finished. She took careful measurements, deciding to bore the holes now while she was still steady. A high-speed drill can rip through anything, and needs great care. Little jokes about holes in the head filtered through her mind as she finished the job. Then the electrodes again, the fine probe. Just testing. She suddenly felt the blissful orgasmic waves passing. She suddenly felt the blissful orgasmic waves passing entirely through her, a wonderful feeling of pleasure, but she had the presence of mind to switch off the current. It must be like that for deep-sea divers. The symptoms of euphoria were so pleasant that she might not wish to surface. Already she was tempted to switch on again. No wonder animals would starve to death rather than stop pressing the buttons. She pressed her own, and was instantly flooded with a feeling of happiness, physical sensation so agreeable that it must surely be the way flesh was meant to feel. She switched off, trembling. She took a while to calm down, administered more local anesthetic, a mild tranquilizer, and set to work again. Another probe. Venors, the lizard lord, stood before her, snarling to show his terrible teeth, his immense and splendid ruffles standing up to impress and intimidate. His claws were terrible, and his anger great. She had trespassed into the innermost secrets of the keep, and she must die.
So you call yourself a seeker?
He hissed, his tongue slithering to manage her language.
You come to spy on us from Earth. You will not be the last to have been disposed of here on Amygdalania? O bride of death, what say you?
Ah, shut up, Veners, you oversized newt. I've telegraphed the contents of the scrolls to my colleagues. You might try anything, but you can't spoil the project now. We now know that you've been stealing precious metals from the lands of Maruzzi and Magoon. We have you, Veners. What are you going to do? For answer, he extended his claws and lashed out at her, but she was quick and lithe and dodged expertly, meanwhile drawing her sword. As she swung it around her head, she felt its power flow through her arms like electricity. Her shoulders flexed. She took her stance, and as the creature darted forward, she hacked off one front leg with a mighty sweep. A frightful roaring filled the cavern like thunder in the hippocampal deeps, but still he advanced, his eyes red with rage, green blood spouting reading the next line, green blood spouting onto the precious tapestries which he had plundered from the weavers of Heschel's Gyrus. She thrust with the sword deep into his rumbling breast, needing all her strength, the strength of conviction, through the armor plating and into the beating heart, as evil and black as his plans. He who had tried to destroy her world was now dying.
Earthwoman, thou hast done for me,
he groaned, blood dripping out of his mouth.
But tell me this, how will you now return to Earth? My minions have destroyed your ship. Did you think we were complete fools?
She sprang back, pulling out the sword which smoked with his acrid humors, and ran for the door, down the 1,000 steps of his tower, and out onto the perpetual twilight of Amygdalania. Amygdalanea? I don't know. The gray plain stretched before her, the only relief her wrecked ship. She thrust her sword into its scabbard, and put up her hands in supplication. Oh, Board of Medical Directors, how will you help me now? The thing is, she thought lazily, cleaning her instruments with alcohol, I need the angst to get me out of scraps. But would I get into the scraps in the first place if it wasn't for the angst? There were always outside circumstances which would excite anyone to ire and wrath. But those who were mild and turned the other cheek, did they get raped, beat up, slaughtered? Well, of course they did. She placed a drop of cannabinol down the central cannula. Instant trip, thoughts going on several levels, delight and distortion and mystery and humor. Great fun. And not a bit of aggro anywhere. When it was over, she lay dreamily smiling, thinking, well, it works just fine. Amazing. But she was lazy. She just wanted to lie there, existing, taking pleasure in being around. She took a look in the mirror at the exposed brain and found it hilarious. She laughed and giggled, feeling the lovely humor rise up from her diaphragm in waves, the funniest brain she had ever seen. A person could live like this, just laughing at their own brain. There was a loud knocking on the door of her apartment. Instant alert. Who was it? Go away. Keeping quiet, wishing them away. Eventually it stopped. They had assumed she was out, had not heard her laughing, she hoped. The last stage of the operation, placing the skull with its holes over the ducts. Perfect fit. Then the scalp, stitches, antiseptic, shot of penicillin, adjustment of drip feed to include high ascorbic acid. Take that out soon. Yes, take that out soon. Her brain cleared of the last molecules of cannabinol, and she felt fine. If it wasn't for the oxygen cylinder, she would have liked to. If it wasn't for the oxygen cylinder, she would have liked to smoke. The cannula ducts were obvious, but she would wear a hat until her hair grew again. Resting, she waited until she felt quite certain she would not feel ill upon getting up, and slowly sat up. When the dizziness had gone, she began putting things in order, had a whiff of oxygen, and went to make a cup of ginseng tea. She washed her face. Everything was fine. She hoped that the films were good. About 3 days convalescence, probably, taking it easy. Quiet, and sleep. And then there would be the matter of obtaining horticultural sun lamps, good manure, and fresh seeds. And a clean water supply down there in the caves. Whole tracts of amygdalania were a wasteland. She would make them blossom. The alarm bell rang, so she went to disconnect it. There was the important matter of getting Venner's minions on her side to assist with repairing her ship. She would be their leader now. Venner's was dead. The phone rang as soon as she plugged it in.
Hello, Nadine. Your phone's been out of order. I've been trying to get you for days.
Hello, who is that? This is Mary Amygdala speaking.
Nadine, quit joking. There's a party tonight in Elsie's studio. Can you come?
You've got the wrong number. This is Mary Amygdala, you creepin' Jesus. She slammed the phone so hard that the plastic cracked, and she picked it up and crashed it against the wall, knocking a pickled cat's brain off a shelf. She was about to start screaming when she remembered. No need. The cannulas. She dripped a small dose of her own special serotonin and was instantly in a different frame of mind. She must have been suffering from post-operative shock. She cleaned up the mess, but felt slightly weak, so she went to sit by the window, pulling the cord on the blinds. The view outside was of a dismal November afternoon, with rain and gusts of wind blowing garbage around. It was enough to depress the spirits, but she wasn't going to get upset. Perhaps the weather would improve by the time she had finished her convalescence. The afternoon mail arrived, and she noticed there had been other mail. She opened the most ominous one, which was disguised as an electricity bill, but she could decipher the strange script. It was a declaration from the minions of Venner's of their sworn enmity and a refusal under any circumstances to help her. She went to sit by the window once more. Tears ran down her face. Not tears of anger, but the tears of the timid and ineffectual. Only rarely as a child had she ever felt like this. Perhaps she would never be able to return to Earth. Perhaps they would stop her crop growing scheme. If she went out, perhaps she would be attacked by louts. There must be ways of dealing with situations without force, but they were alien to her. Surely, though, she had taken the right course. One thing was certain. Nothing in her world would ever be the same again. And that was No Coward's Soul by Josephine Saxton. Josephine Saxton's first story, The Wall, appeared in 1965, since when she is published regularly, if not prolifically, on both sides of the Atlantic. She is the author of 4 novels, the most recent being The Travels of Jane Saint, 1980, all of which defy easy categorization. So, that also was an experience. This is why we read classic science fiction, because some of it is, whew, it's wild. I say classic, I mean like the stuff I'd be reading when I was growing up. Um, so yeah, that was 2 excerpts from Interzone, Volume 1, Number 3 from 1982. So those were fun. I hope people dug those. They were a bit odd, a bit off-putting, and that I think is not a bad thing. That's stuff that makes us think, makes us feel things, right? Right? That's good, huh? It's art. Good stuff. So yeah, I think we can all agree that today wound up being pretty tightly thematic. I was pleased with that. Um, you know, chemical alterations to the brain, changing your perspective, searching the deep, dark depths of the soul, and do-it-yourself furniture. See, we had an overlapping set of themes. Isn't that nice? Alrighty, with that, I got a scooch. Hope people enjoyed. I sure did. Probably some more stories next weekend. Maybe not from Interzone. I don't know. We'll see. I liked it. I'm sorry about the roughness of this one because, again, reading blind and reading really, really faint print. It's hard to read. It's kind of blurry. So, yeah. Thanks again for tuning in. I do this every Friday starting about 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. Daily time, whatever we're on now. I have no idea. I don't know. Eastern Time. Eastern Seaboard of the United States of America. GMT minus what, 8? GMT minus 8, I think? Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I do other streams throughout the week. I've got a Mecha Monday stream where I do something giant robot related or mecha adjacent. And I have a Warframe Wednesday stream where I do Warframe for a couple hours. Thanks again for tuning in. Hope to see you next week. I should be getting these organized. I've got to get, yeah, I'll do that tomorrow probably, or this afternoon if I've got time. I'll get my YouTube channel organized for the month so that Under Pressure is at least put away into its proper playlist on the YouTube channel. And you can watch me live on either YouTube or Twitch. Either one. I've got the links there in the description. I used to stream to Facebook. I don't anymore because the streaming service I currently use doesn't allow for it. Yay! Only 2 at a time, and I'm not paying money. Sorry. Not that anybody watched on those. Not that I even pay attention to my specifically made for the streaming Facebook page at all anyway. So if somebody's tried to communicate to me through there, I have never seen it. I don't really do the social media thing. Sorry. You can try and communicate on my videos or something. Catch me live. And we can take it from there. Okay. Yeah. Thanks again for tuning in. Stay safe, stay sane, and be decent to each other. And be careful when you're messing around with your own brain doing auto surgery. And keep doing those DIY furniture projects, you crazy kids. See you all later. Bye.